We'd like to say welcome to everybody who's watching today on our Facebook page. We'd like to say thank you to everybody who's right here with us too. We're talking about decolonizing the narrative, empowering young Indigenous storytellers. This is a side event at the 23rd session of the Permanent Forum in New York in USA. At the 16th session, something quite significant happened. There was a formation of a caucus, so a few folks came together, indigenous folks from Bolivia, Guatemala, Nepal, and Venezuela. And a great initiative was birthed, the formation of a caucus of indigenous journalists, filmmakers, storytellers, and we came together. In my absence, my colleague from Cultural Survival, Dev Kuma Sunua, who's from Nepal, was here, um, and along with a few other people, one of whom is here as well. This great initiative was formed. IndigenousMediaCaucus.org is where you can go to learn a little bit more about that. So Today we have some very, very important guests with us. Francine Compton is sitting right next to me. She's from IJA. I'll allow her to just give a brief introduction.
Thank you very much for that. I'm Francine Compton. Anin, hello. Sangwetamuk Ndijnakas. My name is Loud Voice of Thunder. I'm an Anishinaabe and a citizen of Sandy Bay, Ojibwe First Nation. And I work with the Indigenous Journalists Association. I'm the associate director there. And prior to that, I was the president for 2.5 years. I only became a member of this organization in 2019, but it's been around for over 40 years. So I'm happy to be here to represent the Indigenous Journalists Association. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And then right next to Francine, David Hernandez Palmar is here as well. He's a filmmaker from Venezuela of the Wayo people. We'll give him a chance to do a brief introduction.
Maya, yeah, I'm so glad to be here. I salute the spirits of this land. Yeah, as I mentioned, my name is David Hernandez Palmar from the Wayo peoples, both in Colombia and Venezuela and South America, in Abya, and a filmmaker, producer, creator, and also a programmer. And I'm happy just, to be here and sharing, the knowledge and all the things we can learn from each other.
Thank you so much. Passing the mic around like it's a peace pipe. My name is Sheldon Ferris from the Goyan San people of South Africa, and I'm an Indigenous rights radio producer and coordinator for cultural survival, and I'm a filmmaker as well. Our topic for today is talking about how do we decolonize the narrative. We know that mainstream media heavily influences the way we see what should be our heroes. It is our heroes, but they take our stories. They've been taking our stories and really owning it. It's 2024. I think telling our stories should be easier with the advent of technology. We should be able to write books, but it seems like it's still very much in their hands, just from our perspective. So, how do you see it, Francine? When you look at movies, and I don't want to name any specific ones, a few recent ones, a few older ones, and these stories sort of become staples in the eyes of us and our children. How do you see it? Is mainstream media still right on top of deciding the narrative, just from your perspective?
Thank you. Um, yeah, I thought a lot about decolonizing the narrative, the topic that we're here to talk about. And, in journalism, we talk about decolonizing journalism. So, one of the things, the messages that we share at IJA is about that distinction, Indigenous journalism is a distinct practice. And we have been telling stories from our communities since time immemorial. And that distinct practice, Indigenous journalism, it drives our self determination and our story sovereignty, so to speak. And to add to that, when we think about storytelling and how our ancestors have been doing it since time immemorial, it is our inherent right to tell stories. So I want to start with that. And that's what we should start with when we talk about decolonizing narratives and journalism, is from that root. That root is that it's part of our inherent right and it drives our self-determination. So storytelling is journalism and films. And so when I think about the bigger arch of storytelling and filmmaking, my dad's a storyteller and a filmmaker and a journalist. And so he has taken that craft and applied it to journalism, but also applied it to film. So that that part of our culture, that storytelling part of our culture that our ancestors have been doing, that is something that we can carry, and that's the message that we need to be sharing with young people. We're here to talk about youth, and having these future generations of storytellers doing film, television, news, documentaries. And so I don't want to say that mainstream media or those other storytellers who are non-Indigenous, I don't want to say that they own our stories, because we do. And so our stories should be told by us, if they're about us, and for us. And really, when it comes to film, you're talking about some of the recent films that have come out. When I look at them, I see how they apply to current day, everyday things, such as, for example, I was talking about a film at lunch with my coworker, Killers of the Flower Moon. And I'm not a film critic, but one thing that stuck out to me that I can't stop thinking about is how they had caretakers, administrators, the people in the film, and the real life people who the film is about. They had, in Canada, we called them Indian agents, but these were government officials who would basically be your caretaker and help you decide how you spend your money. So ever since that scene, I've been thinking, we don't need caretakers. We don't need anyone to tell us how to do our stories. And so that's the message I really want to start with. And it's so important that we take ownership of that and spread that type of message so that young people can see themselves doing what we do in the future.
Awesome. I like your answer. Really, really good answer. Thanks so much for that, Francine. So we'll move the question on to David, the next one, and we'll ask David, what do you think are some of the challenges for establishing and also sustaining Indigenous-run media outlets, and how can we overcome some of these challenges?
I think first of all there are some NGOs that they call themselves indigenous led, and I really love how relatives from North America they have from Torre Island in this case have mentioned or they have the closest definition of what we feel like, oh well, makes sense, what is that in English, indigenous led mean. um, and so when we're given spaces in those institutions, we are, we have certainty that it's not our place, but we're just holding the door open as much as we can so we can, let our relatives to let in, and that's, I think, the metaphor, of the need actually, reflects your question, what are those challenges, what are our priorities, um, and I would say like I think the challenges are more like, we need to value amongst ourselves that our words is worth, that, that our stories need to be unscaped just because, we breathe and we're worth of it. And that's the main thing I would say, like, well, if we are just certain of that idea, it's not a notion of that certainty, then we'll be like, okay, now we know what is priority for us to, maybe to participate in a media outlet or create ours by our own. I think that's the first reflection because, I used to be the political advisor to the largest umbrella organization for cinema and communication in Latin America. A lot of organizations, different mandates, and we're asking the same questions. Do we want to create another platform just like theirs, or do we want just to create one that is like us, and that actually embraces, and we don't want just to compete against them or just to compare with them. And I think the challenge is more like, how do we reflect ourselves? How do we expect to be seen, or how do we expect our relatives, or youngsters to participate in this big conversation? So I guess, I would say, like, doors that are open for us, conversations that we don't have our voice to be part of. How do we, participate in those? What is the decision maker around those? So media outlets, I would say, like, there are indigenous media outlets, there are indigenous-led media outlets, and I'm happy because it's not something that is far away. It exists, and it's working. But I think the challenge is more, how do we connect with other peoples? They don't have the same experience, they don't have the same, maybe circumstance or context. They can be supported by other relatives. And my final say would be, like, if we have more collaborations with those that have a bit of understanding, what could be, economic sustainability, then we can learn from that. And then we'll start, from little just to do as much as we can. Because at the very end, I think there is also a lot of, realities that is not at necessarily to solve by our hands, but for sure our voice can be used just to, make a relative to feel like, they have their own tools to sort that out.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. So, Francine, when we think about storytelling, the first thing that comes to my mind, and I could probably guess yours too, and yours, David, is sitting around a fire and beating a drum, and elders telling kids stories about yesteryear. I think that's something that's probably the same or very similar in many indigenous cultures. So today, our kids are distracted by technology. Um, and maybe it's a good thing, it could be a bad thing too. But how do we marry the two? How do we get them around the fire so that oral traditions can continue um, while they have PlayStations and iPhones and that sort of thing? So how do we bring the two together? Do you think it's possible, Francine?
That's a tough question. I want to believe it's possible. When I think of storytelling, I often I think of TV actually, because I grew up watching TV, the 6 o'clock news. My dad was on the 6 o'clock news telling stories, and so that inspired us as kids, right? We would look at the television, see our dad on there, run up to that TV, kiss the TV, run around repeating his sign off. At the end of the news story, everyone says their name, and CBC News Winnipeg. So that's what we repeated. So I share that story because that's what ignited the spark in me. Not just seeing him on TV, but he took me to the studio, the newsroom, the control room, so I got to see the behind the scenes, and that spark started when I was in kindergarten. So I want to believe that if we find ways to spark kids, their interest in what we're doing by them seeing us. So if we can't get the TV screens in front of them because it's the other devices in front of them, then we need to get on those devices that they're on, and find ways to show them not only storytelling is cool, but there are jobs out there, and it is a successful career. And Indigenous journalism isn't going anywhere. Yes, there are newspapers that are shuttering, but as we're here today in the Indigenous Media Zone at the Permanent Forum, and we're talking about the need for Indigenous owned media. And if we, collaborate with them, then we can teach them. So there are really good examples of that. I used to work for APTN, the Aboriginal People's Television Network, which was the world's first national Indigenous broadcaster. And so being brought up in your own place with your own people, telling your own stories is a very empowering way to be in this industry. So we also need our own media outlets with our own people to mentor those young storytellers. So the news may not be very popular on certain apps or certain social media platforms, but we need to get back to our communities on the ground in the schools, and showing young people that storytelling, again, it is their inherent right. It's part of their culture, and they can put the microphone in front of their their leadership, and ask for accountability. And so that's really the angle that I come in from with storytelling and news. So I don't have the solution to how to get it on the devices for kids, but we can't stop trying.
I think David is volunteering to start a TikTok page. That's one of the solutions.
I can't do it, so. Yeah.
All right. So historically, indigenous peoples have been given an unfair deal when it comes to financing these kind of institutions that needs to be built. Do we knock on doors in 2024, David, or do we start building it from scratch and just do it ourselves? Or do they owe us? Do they owe us?
That's a complicated question. No, well, this was gonna be my answer, but what I really love by getting to know more relatives is that actually we know that we don't have to start from scratch. We had a reference. Now we have access to how to do it because they know how we can, maybe make an our version of it, from according to our, peoples. Um, I would say something like, for instance, I saw my TV in Canada. It's such an inspiration for us. Like, what it means to for global South to understand that even in Canada there is a digital gap. They don't have access to certain things in Nunavut, and yet they managed to launch Isuma TV, not only for watching movies, but also they use it for previous consultation when mining companies they want to do something there. They use that platform. So I would say like that we need to find more look up for more reference, from other relatives that have gone through that. They have invested not only money but also, blood, literally, and we have to honor that. So I think by quote other experiences, it makes us stronger. We don't have to, start from scratch. We have to be humble enough, to think that whatever is not on radar doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So I'm all for not starting from scratch, but quoting other experiences. Yeah.
We'll ask the same question to Francis.
Oh, I'm glad you asked. They owe us, and we should demand it. And I say that because of the formation of APTN. It was legislated, and it was licensed, a national license, so that this channel could be available to all Canadians, and also it helps with advancing reconciliation. So I say those things, but I really do mean it, that it is owed, and we should demand, because we're the ones who can do it properly, and not just do it justice, but also honor the people and the communities that we're telling stories for. We're the conduit for those communities and for those voices. So we need to be able to have the outlets to do those things. So um, I also want to add that they owe us because of all the historical coverage over generations, the historical damaging coverage by so many outlets that we can't even name them. We've audited mainstream media at Indigenous Journalists Association, and the data, the findings, they're shocking, and they're damning to these outlets. So um, if every outlet looked back at their historical coverage, they may come to the conclusion that they owe us as well.
So I would like for us to focus on some positives. There has to be some indigenous peoples doing something right out out there. So if if I can pick your brain a little bit, so that we can, and I'm asking this because we need examples, we need templates, we need blueprints, to look at. So has anybody or anything come to mind? I don't want to ask too difficult questions.
I'll go first and pass it over. Yeah, great examples. I'm in a room full of great examples for Indigenous media, so we'll start here. Two of our past presidents who are mentors and leaders in the industry. But what we're doing at the Indigenous Journalists Association and what has been done by our founders and leadership before me, that's positive. And if we're looking for role models, if we looked at our own Hall of Fame, we would see so many role models there. Mine was and always has been my dad, Jim Compton, and I think that there's so many of us Indigenous journalists that we all have our own role models and mentors. And I want to give a shout out to Duncan McHugh as well, who wrote a book on decolonizing journalism and is teaching it. So that's also passing on that knowledge, and that's what a really good role model does, is pass it on.
It'll be unfair just to name a person, but it's valid for you. I mean, I will be happy if my dad will be the same person. Um, so for me, I think what really makes me hopeful is just to see the new generation taking all over the place, but also like they feel right about wearing the regalia just because they have the reference that we, worked so hard. Even, representing ourselves has been really tricky task also because we want to do it good. Because precisely we don't want to do it the way they did, the media outlets, run by Western people. And especially in New York, there is the largest indigenous migration population in the world. So what it means for people that are not from Tidal Island, yeah, there are indigenous peoples to other islands, to other territories, and they're here. For them to understand that for some reason they are here, not only for economical purposes, but maybe there were mining companies taking place in their territories, and that's why they migrated here. So for them to reconnect through cinema, journalism, storytelling, for them to feel like they are worth to not only reclaim their identity, whether they are born here or somewhere else, I think that's really beautiful and hopeful. And that's something that also, for us that remain the territory, it also is a lesson to learn that we have family not only our territories, but, over yonder. And yeah, so two people could mention that my inspiration, mom, um, but also to relatives. Teofila Palafox, she is like, the first Latin American filmmaker. She's still alive. And Meratamita, she passed away from Maori peoples. Because they were women. Because all the odds were against them, just because they were women. It also like for them just to bring all the knowledge, the safe spaces for the rest of the diversity within our communities is to have a say in the conversation that we are worth of. So I would say, these three people, but also I would love to celebrate, new generations that are just bringing, new things without the traumas or not all the traumas that we still carry with us. Because what I learned from Torre Island relatives, that trauma is not something you feel; it's a system that works against you. And that's something that was really hard for us to see as a global South relatives, because we have other way to relate to it, other experiences, of course, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't affect us, because it's there as well. And also, I think we can relate to the joyful things, by identifying what not to do, but also what we can focus on. Yeah.
Wonderful. I have so many thoughts just rushing through my mind, and I wanna just acknowledge your dad. I think very very important. It's clear that he's had a huge influence on you. So, with that being said, I'm thinking about my grandmother who used to relay stories about her great grandmother, who was in Cape Town in the 1800s. So my grandmother passed away about 4 years ago. She was in the 80s, but she told me stories about slavery in our family, like right at the end of her life. She shared that with me. So that to me was like a revelation. I had no idea. She kept it hidden. She didn't want to expose it to us, but she told me, and it made such a difference. Like it was just the two of us. I used to spend a lot of time with her, and that's what she shared with me. So very very important. Um, the other thing that's rushing through my mind is that scene in Killers of the Flower Moon when Native American people was super rich. It's something that we don't see every day. It's not portrayed that way. So it would be awesome if we could tell that story differently from our perspective. So we need to be able to do that just from a different perspective. So that's my closing thoughts. I'd like to hand the mic to you for closing thoughts.
Thank you so much. I really like that you said that. That the same thought crossed my mind. Had that story been told, by an Indigenous person. Um, my closing thoughts are really that, to sum it up, we're talking about decolonizing the narrative, and I think we need to, again, just start with that root that it's our inherent right to tell stories. And that is one thing that I hope that we can teach young people, because we do need future generations of storytellers, to fill our roles when we retire one day. And, we're really doing that at the Indigenous Journalists Association. We have a journalism fellowship, and in the last few years that I have been part of this organization, I have seen students come through that program who are now going on to Masters of Journalism, who are now mentoring. So I see the progression of young Indigenous storytellers, and it's a really great place to be in, to see so many good things happening. And I just want to be able to see more of that, more young people in their communities, telling their communities stories, and maybe they will be empowered to start their own media outlets in those communities. And they don't need to leave to go to the big city or to go to the mainstream outlets. So I really think that it was great to have this discussion and to talk about youth and how we can decolonize this narrative to empower them. So thank you.
So I fully agree with you. We have the right to tell our own stories, or to tell us stories, actually. Um, I would love to quote a relative from Karnak people in Brazil. He says that for every story we tell, we postpone the end of the world. So I would say, like, no matter what media or means or way to express ourselves, our stories are medicine. It means something really important for someone else, And I think just by telling a story, we can heal. So that's why, in my case, I love, watching movies or listen to the podcasts and stories, because that makes me reflect, something that I may not be seeing myself. I try time to time to look on my face on the river, on the surface of the river, to see, well, what's going on there, you know, for reality check-in. But yeah, I mean, that's the quote I would love just to share, with the audience and the people that are just watching this. Mhm.
My colleague has just flagged me down and said we cannot close without discussing just the criminalization of indigenous journalists. So let's open up again and and get into that. I'll ask you to comment.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot more of that, and we are we're awarding Indigenous journalists and outlets who are advancing these types of fights for press freedom. As we were talking about movies, I really thought that I would love to see a movie about Indigenous free press and the fights that some of these outlets have had to go through to get free press in their communities. When it comes to the criminalization of journalists, it's it's going to look different in each of our countries, right? In the U.S. and in Canada. So I'll speak about Canada for a moment very carefully, and that there's been a few cases in recent years where Indigenous journalists have been arrested for covering land defenders, defending their land against resource development. And in those cases, if the journalist hadn't been there, then the story wouldn't have been fully told. So that's what I will say about the criminalization and why journalists shouldn't be criminalized for covering the news.
And as long as there is racism, no matter you have a diploma of journalism or not, and Jewish relatives are, more likely to be put in jail in comparison to other non-Indigenous peoples. And that's something we have brought up to the Human Rights Council, recommended to the state members of United Nations, uh, that criminalizing Indigenous peoples are also criminalizing, communities at large. And I would say, like, the more we create solidarity, create togetherness to file a case in international courts, would make a stronger, I wouldn't say legally binding things, but there is a precedent there, if we keep on doing that. So that's something that I think also relative that our journalists are aware of. They might know the risk they're taking. And that's a bravery I really admire. Um, and I think not only journalists but also land defenders, put in jail. So I would say, like, we need just to quote also I don't know the word in English, but the observatorios, the institutions that are actually overseeing these cases, would be a great thing just to quote and work in the near future in the Indigenous Media Caucus. Because they exist, and they are actually categorized by country and the names of the people, which nation they belong to, and that'd be great just to do a great follow up of it. But yeah, I mean, I fully condemn the criminalization of relative communities and land defenders and journalists, of course.
Thank you very much, David. Just want to just reach out to our audience to see if there's any comments from the floor.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, can I give you the mic?
Thank you. Can I ask, at the present, do you think which is more important for journalists to protect our indigenous people's rights between, to spread awareness, like self-motivated awareness, like we are indigenous people, we have to do something by ourselves, like instead of others telling us what to do, and for journalists to push our improve the law, to push the government to improve our law. Like, do I make sense?
I think I know what you're getting at there. So our storytelling and investigative journalism does have the power to change laws and legislation that can better the lives of Indigenous peoples, our relatives, in our communities. So, to try and answer your question, I think the role as journalists and storytellers is not necessarily to be that advocate on those front lines, but we can be the voice and the conduit on our front lines and tell the stories for those individuals. And our storytelling is so powerful and accurate, and we've investigated so well, we've uncovered documents that we can change laws. So, that ideally those are the elements that go toward an investigation. But I would say, use that microphone, use journalism as a tool, and you can do it in an unbiased manner in order to see laws changed, and we can change lives for the better with our storytelling.
I would just quote a case, when the pipeline was, the tar sands actually back in the days in Canada, the largest participation of, stakeholders, they were people from Venezuela, from the country I'm from, after they made a coup d'etat there. And so when we started just to, to put the dots on the canvas and draw the line, we said, oh, there's something going on here. So there was an interconnection, in the things, and the fact, in the facts, So I would say, like, the more you know on the struggles of the people, then you're gonna realize it makes sense. Oh, this is connected to what's going on here in my own territory. And because of the work of investigative reports of Indigenous relatives, journalists, we were able to host a people's trial in Colombia, and relatives from Canada, U.S., and also from other countries that were just, judging the oil companies. This is what you did in the territories. It might be symbolic, but at the very same time, we knew that, truth is collective, the stronger is collective, and it can be just a reference just to, not in this case to file a case, but actually to do an actual recommendation at the United Nations, why is this economical power affecting this amount of indigenous peoples, not only in Canada, U.S., but also in Colombia, Venezuela, So I would say, like, sometimes policymaking can be a bit frustrating because not only passing a law, it's also, implementation, follow-up, money for it. But I would say that it's not the reason just to keep trying. I think we should go for it, and I think, our work should be a reference, and an argument enough for policymaking to do things better. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll just see if anybody else has any questions on the floor from Uganda, perhaps. No, anybody else? Okay, so thank you so much, everybody, for viewing today. We really appreciate it. David Hernandez Palmar from Venezuela, thank you so much. Indigenousmediacaucus.org, and Francine Compton from the IJA, International Journalists Association. Thank you so much for joining us today, and that's how we end it. Thank you.